Catherine Elizabeth Middleton stirred beneath the silk sheets of her bedroom at Kensington Palace as the first pale rays of dawn crept through the heavy velvet curtains. The digital clock on her nightstand glowed softly, showing 5:30 in the morning. Today was not just any ordinary day. Today her father-in-law would become King Charles III, and her husband William would take his place as heir to the throne in front of the entire world. She lay still for a moment, listening to the sounds of the palace coming alive around her. Even at this early hour, she could hear the distant murmur of voices and the soft padding of feet in the corridors below. Security teams had been conducting their final sweeps since 4 in the morning. Kitchen staff had arrived even earlier to begin preparing the breakfast that would fuel the royal family through what promised to be an exhausting but magnificent day. Catherine reached for her phone on the bedside table and saw dozens of messages from friends and family wishing her luck. Her mother, Carol, had sent a simple text that read, "We are so proud of you, darling. You were born for this day." The message brought tears to her eyes, and she took a deep breath to compose herself. There would be time for emotions later, but right now she needed to focus on the mammoth task ahead. The Princess of Wales slipped out of bed and padded across the thick carpet to the window. Drawing back the curtains slightly, she peeked out at the grounds of Kensington Palace. Already she could see photographers with telephoto lenses positioned at strategic points, hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal family. Beyond the palace gates, the streets of London were beginning to fill with people wrapped in sleeping bags and clutching thermos flasks. Many had camped overnight to secure the best viewing spots for the procession to Westminster Abbey. A gentle knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Her personal assistant entered carrying the silver tray with a delicate china cup and saucer. The familiar aroma of Earl Grey tea filled the room, along with the scent of freshly baked croissants from the palace kitchens. Catherine smiled gratefully as she accepted the tea. The warm liquid helped calm her nerves and clear her mind for the day ahead. Within minutes, her bedroom transformed into a bustling center of activity. Her personal stylist, Amanda Jenkins, arrived first, wheeling a large black case that contained the tools of her trade. She was followed by Sarah Chapman, the makeup artist who had worked with Catherine on numerous royal engagements over the years. Both women moved with quiet efficiency, having rehearsed this morning routine several times in the weeks leading up to the coronation. The garment bags hanging in the adjoining dressing room seemed to glow with their own inner light. Catherine had spent weeks making the final selection from among 5 potential outfits, each created by different British designers. The pressure to choose correctly had been immense. Every thread, every bead, every stitch would be scrutinized by millions of people around the world. Fashion magazines would analyze her choices for months to come, and historians would record them for posterity. Sarah began setting up her makeup station, while Amanda carefully laid out the undergarments and accessories that would complete the ensemble. The diamond and sapphire tiara that Catherine would wear had been selected from the royal collection and cleaned to perfection by the crown jeweler. It sat in its velvet-lined case, sparkling even in the subdued lighting of the bedroom. Catherine settled into the chair, facing the large illuminated mirror that had been specially installed for occasions like this. As Sarah began applying the foundation, she closed her eyes and thought about her 3 children who were still sleeping soundly in their rooms down the hall. Prince George, at 10 years old, was now old enough to understand the significance of the day. Princess Charlotte had been practicing her curtsy for weeks. Little Prince Louis, at 5, was simply excited about wearing his ceremonial outfit and seeing the soldiers in their red coats. The transformation began slowly and methodically. Sarah worked with practiced hands, applying each layer of makeup with precision. The look needed to be flawless, yet natural enough to photograph beautifully in both the dim lighting of Westminster Abbey and the bright sunlight of the palace balcony. Every decision, from the shade of lipstick to the thickness of the eyeliner, had been carefully planned and tested in advance. Meanwhile, Amanda began the delicate process of dressing Catherine in the layers that would create her stunning appearance. First came the specially designed undergarments that would ensure the gown hung perfectly. Then the slip that would prevent any unfortunate transparency issues under the bright camera lights. Each piece was a work of art in itself, crafted by the most skilled seamstresses in Britain. The weeks leading up to the coronation had been filled with countless decisions, but none more important than choosing what Catherine would wear on the most watched day of her life. In the private fitting room deep within Kensington Palace, 5 of Britain's most celebrated designers had presented their visions for the future Queen's coronation ensemble. Catherine stood before a wall of mirrors as each gown was carefully brought forward by white-gloved assistants. The first dress was a creation by Sarah Burton, who had designed Catherine's wedding dress years earlier. It featured intricate lacework that told the story of British heritage through delicate patterns woven into the fabric. The second option came from Stella McCartney and showcased modern British elegance with clean lines and sustainable materials that reflected Catherine's environmental concerns. The third dress made Catherine catch her breath. Created by emerging designer Amelia Wickstead, it was crafted from the finest cream silk that seemed to glow with its own inner light. The bodice was fitted perfectly to Catherine's figure, while the skirt flowed like water when she moved. What made this dress truly special was the embroidery that covered every inch of the fabric. Skilled artisans had spent months hand-stitching silver thread into intricate patterns that represented the 4 nations of the United Kingdom. Roses for England were embroidered along the hemline in delicate clusters that caught the light with every step. Scottish thistles climbed up the left side of the dress, their spiky leaves rendered in metallic thread that shimmered like moonlight on water. Welsh daffodils bloomed across the bodice, their golden centers made from tiny beads that twinkled like stars. Irish shamrocks danced along the sleeves, each one slightly different from the others, showing the hand-crafted nature of the work. Catherine ran her fingers along the embroidery, feeling the raised texture of the silver thread beneath her fingertips. The attention to detail was extraordinary. Each flower petal had been individually stitched with threads of varying shades to create depth and dimension. The stems and leaves were worked in different techniques that created subtle variations in texture and shine. The fourth dress was a bold departure from tradition, designed by Christopher Kane in a rich burgundy that would photograph beautifully against the golden backdrop of Westminster Abbey. The final option was a classical creation by Bruce Oldfield, who had dressed Princess Diana and understood the weight of royal protocol better than most designers. For 3 afternoons, Catherine tried on each dress, moving in them, sitting carefully to test how they would behave during the long ceremony. She walked up and down the fitting room, practicing the precise steps she would need to take in Westminster Abbey. The dresses were beautiful, but she needed more than beauty. She needed a dress that would make her feel confident and comfortable during one of the most important days of her life. The decision process was not hers alone. A committee of palace officials weighed in with their opinions about how each dress would photograph for television and print media. Royal historians offered their thoughts on which choice would best honor the tradition of past coronations while still feeling fresh and modern. Even William was consulted, though he diplomatically said he thought she would look beautiful in any of them. Catherine's mother, Carol Middleton, flew in from Bucklebury to offer her support during the final fitting session. She sat quietly in a chair watching her daughter transform into each version of herself that the dresses offered. When Catherine emerged wearing the cream silk gown with its elaborate embroidery, Carol's hand flew to her throat and tears sprang to her eyes. The stylist, who had worked with Catherine for years, stood beside her in stunned silence. Even the seamstresses, who had been pinning hems and adjusting sleeves, stopped their work to stare. Catherine looked at herself in the 3-way mirror and knew immediately that this was the dress. It felt like it had been made for her, not just in terms of fit, but in terms of spirit. The embroidery seemed to come alive under the fitting room lights. As Catherine turned slowly, the silver threads caught and reflected the light, creating an almost magical effect. She felt the weight of the dress around her, but it was a comfortable weight that reminded her of the responsibility she carried as future queen. The final alterations were minimal. A slight adjustment to the neckline to ensure it would photograph well from all angles. A small modification to the sleeves so they would not restrict her movement during the ceremony. The head seamstress marked each change with silk pins that disappeared into the intricate embroidery. Catherine settled into the plush leather seat of the royal car as it pulled away from Kensington Palace precisely at 8:30 in the morning. The vehicle had been specially prepared for this journey with bulletproof glass and communication equipment that would keep her connected to the security teams throughout the route to Westminster Abbey. She smoothed the cream silk of her gown, carefully making sure the delicate embroidery would not wrinkle during the 20-minute drive through London. Outside the tinted windows, the streets were already packed with people who had been waiting since the early hours of the morning. Some had camped overnight in sleeping bags and folding chairs, determined to catch a glimpse of the royal family on this historic day. Union Jack flags waved from every available space, and the red, white, and blue bunting stretched between lampposts created a festive canopy over the processional route. The car moved slowly through the crowds, allowing security teams to monitor every face and movement along the way. Catherine waved gracefully from behind the window, her diamond and sapphire tiara catching the morning sunlight that streamed through the glass. The gems sparkled and sent tiny rainbows dancing across the car's cream-colored interior. Each time she lifted her hand to wave, the silver embroidery on her dress shimmered and caught the light, creating an almost magical effect. Children pressed their faces against the barriers, hoping to see the princess clearly. Their parents lifted them onto their shoulders for a better view, while grandparents pointed excitedly as the royal convoy passed. Catherine smiled warmly at each group, knowing that many of these people had traveled hundreds of miles to be part of this momentous occasion. Some held handmade signs with messages of support, while others simply stood in reverent silence as history passed before their eyes. The weight of the tiara on her head reminded Catherine of the gravity of the day ahead. This particular piece had been worn by Queen Elizabeth during her own coronation decades earlier, and now it rested on Catherine's head, connecting her to the long line of queens who had come before. The sapphires were said to bring wisdom and protection to the wearer, while the diamonds symbolized the enduring strength of the monarchy. Through the communication system in the car, Catherine could hear updates from the security teams positioned along the route. Everything was proceeding according to plan, with crowds remaining peaceful and enthusiastic. Police officers on horseback moved alongside the convoy, while plainclothes agents blended into the crowds, watching for any signs of trouble. The Metropolitan Police had been planning this operation for months, ensuring that every possible scenario had been considered and prepared for. In the car behind her, the children were traveling with their nanny and William's private secretary. Prince George looked very serious in his formal uniform, understanding that this was an important day for his family. Princess Charlotte gazed out the window in wonder at the massive crowds, while Prince Louis bounced excitedly in his seat, pointing at the colorful decorations that lined the streets. The car slowed as they approached a particularly dense crowd near Trafalgar Square. Catherine could see people hanging out of office windows and standing on rooftops, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal family. The sound of cheering grew louder as more people spotted the convoy and realized that the Princess of Wales was inside. She continued to wave, acknowledging the enthusiasm of the crowd, while maintaining the composed demeanor expected of a future queen. As they passed St. James's Park, Catherine caught sight of William's car traveling parallel to hers in a separate motorcade. He looked handsome and dignified in his military uniform, but she could see the tension in his shoulders that revealed his nervousness about the ceremony ahead. When their eyes met through their respective windows, he gave her a reassuring smile that reminded her why this day was so important, not just for the country, but for their family. The massive stone towers of Westminster Abbey came into view as they turned the final corner. The bells had been ringing since dawn, filling the air with a joyful sound that could be heard across London. Catherine took a deep breath as she saw the red carpet stretching up the steps to the ancient doors where kings and queens had been crowned for nearly 1,000 years. The car came to a gentle stop at the base of the Abbey steps, where a small army of photographers and television cameras waited to capture her arrival. Catherine checked her appearance in the small mirror built into the car door, making sure every detail was perfect. The moment she stepped out of this car, the world would be watching her every movement, and she was determined to represent her family and her country with grace and dignity. Her lady-in-waiting stood ready to help with the train of her dress, while security officers formed a protective circle around the area. The roar of the crowd grew even louder as people realized the Princess of Wales had arrived at Westminster Abbey for the coronation of King Charles III. The black door of the royal car opened with a soft click, and Catherine placed one elegant foot onto the red carpet that stretched before her like a crimson river leading to the ancient doors of Westminster Abbey. The moment her cream silk slipper touched the ground, a thunderous roar erupted from the thousands of people pressed against the barriers along the route. Cameras clicked like a symphony of mechanical insects as photographers captured her first step into this historic day. Catherine paused for just a moment, allowing her lady-in-waiting to arrange the flowing train of her gown behind her. The silver embroidery caught the morning sunlight and seemed to come alive with dancing patterns of light. Each rose, thistle, daffodil, and shamrock shimmered as if the flowers themselves were breathing in the crisp London air. She looked up at the towering Gothic spires of Westminster Abbey, where kings and queens had been crowned for nearly 1,000 years. The children emerged from their car beside her, and Catherine felt a surge of motherly pride as she saw how perfectly turned out they all looked. Prince George stood tall and serious in his formal uniform, his young face reflecting the gravity of the occasion. Princess Charlotte looked like a little angel in her cream dress that echoed her mother's elegant style, while Prince Louis bounced on his toes with barely contained excitement at all the pageantry surrounding him. Catherine knelt gracefully beside her youngest son, straightening his collar and whispering gentle reminders about the ceremony they were about to witness. Her movements were fluid and natural despite the formal gown and the weight of the tiara on her head. The gesture showed the watching world that beneath all the royal protocol, she remained first and foremost a devoted mother who understood that this day would be remembered by her children for the rest of their lives. The massive oak doors of Westminster Abbey stood open before them, revealing glimpses of the golden interior that had been transformed for the coronation ceremony. Floating music drifted out from within where the choir had been rehearsing since dawn. The sound mixed with the bells that continued to ring across London, announcing to the world that this momentous day had officially begun. Catherine began her walk up the red-carpeted steps, moving with the grace that had made her a global fashion icon. Her posture was perfect, her shoulders straight, and her head held high beneath the sparkling tiara. Each step was deliberate and measured as she had practiced countless times in the palace corridors. The train of her dress flowed behind her like liquid moonlight, while her lady-in-waiting followed discreetly, ensuring that every fold fell perfectly. Inside the Abbey, 2,000 guests rose to their feet as one. The sound was like a great wave washing through the ancient stone walls. World leaders, celebrities, members of the Commonwealth, and representatives from every corner of the British Isles had gathered to witness this historic moment. Their faces turned toward the entrance, where Catherine appeared like a vision in cream and silver. The light filtering through the Abbey's stained glass windows painted rainbow patterns across the floor and walls. Catherine walked through these pools of colored light, and her dress seemed to absorb and reflect each hue. The silver embroidery caught the reds and blues and golds, creating an ever-changing display that made her appear almost ethereal as she moved down the aisle. Catherine's eyes scanned the familiar faces in the congregation. She spotted her parents, Carol and Michael Middleton, seated in places of honor, their faces glowing with pride and emotion. Her sister Pippa gave her an encouraging smile, while her brother James nodded with approval at her composed demeanor. These family connections grounded her even as she walked deeper into the heart of one of the most formal ceremonies in the British calendar. The children followed behind her, with William's private secretary keeping a watchful eye on their behavior. Prince Louis struggled to contain his excitement, pointing at the golden ceremonial objects that lined the altar, while Princess Charlotte walked with perfect posture, copying her mother's elegant movements. Prince George looked around the Abbey with wide eyes, taking in every detail of this moment that would one day be part of his own story. Catherine took her place in the front row of Westminster Abbey as the ancient ceremony began to unfold around her. The golden throne where King Charles would soon be crowned sat majestically at the center of the altar, surrounded by centuries-old regalia that caught the light streaming through the stained glass windows. She folded her hands gracefully in her lap, feeling the weight of history pressing down upon the assembled congregation like a gentle but powerful presence. The Archbishop of Canterbury stepped forward wearing robes that had been specially embroidered for this occasion. His voice echoed through the vast stone space as he began the opening prayers that had been spoken at coronations for over 1,000 years. Catherine listened to each word, knowing that someday those same sacred phrases would be spoken over William when his time came to wear the crown. The thought sent a shiver of anticipation mixed with nervousness through her body. Beside her, the children sat in perfect silence despite their young ages. Prince George had been coached extensively on proper behavior during the ceremony, and he sat as still as a statue watching every movement on the altar with fascination. Princess Charlotte swung her legs gently under her chair, but kept her eyes fixed on the proceedings, understanding somehow that this was a moment that demanded her full attention. Prince Louis pointed excitedly at the golden ceremonial objects, but kept his voice to whispers that only his mother could hear. The moment arrived when King Charles walked slowly toward the coronation chair carved from oak and used by monarchs for 700 years. Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes as she watched her father-in-law approach the throne that would transform him from prince to king. The weight of ceremony and tradition seemed to settle over his shoulders like an invisible cloak as he prepared to take on the most important role in the British Commonwealth. The crown itself appeared almost to glow as it was carried forward on a velvet cushion. The Stedward's crown, with its ancient gold and precious stones, had crowned monarchs since the restoration of the monarchy centuries earlier. Catherine watched as it was lifted high above King Charles's bowed head, while the Archbishop spoke the words that would change everything. When the crown finally came to rest on his head, the transformation was complete, and the congregation erupted in a thunderous cry of "God save the King." Catherine felt William stiffen beside her as the moment came for him to pay homage to his father. She watched with pride and emotion as her husband knelt before the newly crowned king and pledged his loyalty in words that bound him forever to the service of crown and country. His voice was strong and clear as he spoke the ancient oath, but Catherine could see the emotion flickering in his eyes as he looked up at his father, now transformed into his sovereign. The colored light from the stained glass windows seemed to dance across Catherine's dress as the ceremony continued. Each time she moved even slightly, the silver embroidery caught and reflected the blues, reds, and golds that painted the abbey's interior. She appeared to be wearing the very light of the sacred space itself, as if she had been chosen not just to witness this moment, but to be an integral part of its magic and meaning. Throughout the long ceremony, Catherine remained perfectly composed, even as cameras captured her every expression and gesture. She knew that millions of people around the world were watching her reactions, and she was determined to show the grace and dignity that would be expected of her when her own time came to support William on his coronation day. Every smile, every tear, every moment of quiet reverence was being recorded for history. The music swelled and filled every corner of the ancient building as the ceremony reached its climax. The choir's voices soared upward toward the vaulted ceiling, carrying with them the hopes and prayers of the nation. Catherine closed her eyes for a moment and let the sound wash over her, feeling connected to all the queens who had sat in this same place during coronations past, and all those who would sit here in ceremonies yet to come. When she opened her eyes again, she saw King Charles fully transformed by the ceremony into the monarch he was always destined to become. The crown sat easily on his head, as if it had been waiting all his life to find its proper place. Catherine smiled, knowing that she had witnessed something that happened perhaps once or twice in a lifetime, and that her children would carry the memory of this day with them forever. The ancient words continued to echo through Westminster Abbey as the coronation of King Charles III neared its conclusion, and Catherine prepared for the next phase of this historic day. The ceremony concluded with a final blessing that seemed to linger in the air above Westminster Abbey like incense. Catherine rose from her seat with fluid grace as the newly crowned King Charles III began his procession back down the aisle. The golden crown caught the light with every step he took, sending flashes of brilliance across the ancient stone walls. She gathered her children around her, whispering quick reminders about the next part of their day as they prepared to leave the abbey. The journey back to Buckingham Palace felt different from the morning ride. The crowd seemed even larger and more enthusiastic now that they had witnessed history being made. Catherine had changed into a striking cobalt blue ensemble for the balcony appearance, and the rich color seemed to glow against her skin as sunlight streamed through the car windows. The sapphires in her new tiara matched the dress perfectly, creating a coordinated look that photographers would later describe as absolutely stunning. Prince Louis pressed his face against the window, pointing excitedly at the soldiers in their red coats who lined the route. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Catherine found herself smiling more broadly than protocol usually permitted. Princess Charlotte sat primly beside her mother, occasionally reaching out to touch the soft fabric of Catherine's new dress with wonder in her eyes. Prince George had grown quiet during the ceremony, but now seemed energized by the celebration happening in the streets around them. As they approached Buckingham Palace, Catherine could see thousands of people packed into the area in front of the building. The famous balcony stood empty and waiting for the royal family to make their traditional appearance. Red, white, and blue flags waved like a sea of color, while the sound of singing and cheering created a joyful noise that could be heard even through the closed windows of the royal car. The family gathered in the blue drawing room just behind the famous balcony doors. Catherine checked each child's appearance one final time, adjusting Louis's collar and smoothing Charlotte's hair. The newly crowned king looked magnificent in his ceremonial robes, while William stood proudly beside his father wearing the uniform of the Welsh Guards. The weight of the moment settled over them as they prepared to step out before the nation. The doors to the balcony opened, and the roar from the crowd below was unlike anything Catherine had ever heard. It seemed to rise up from the ground itself, as if the very earth was celebrating the coronation of its new king. She stepped forward into the bright afternoon sunlight and felt the warmth on her face as she looked out over the sea of people stretching far into the distance. Catherine waved with practiced elegance, her movements smooth and graceful despite the excitement of the moment. The blue of her dress seemed to shimmer in the sunlight, while the diamonds in her tiara caught every ray and threw it back to the crowd in sparks of fire. She looked every inch the future queen as she stood beside William, acknowledging the cheers and applause that rolled up from the mall like waves on a shore. Prince Louis, who had been so well behaved during the ceremony, finally let his excitement show. He pointed enthusiastically at the crowd and waved both hands, making the people below laugh with delight at his natural charm. Princess Charlotte performed a perfect curtsy that drew approving murmurs from the onlookers, while Prince George stood tall and serious beside his grandfather, understanding the importance of the moment. The Royal Air Force had timed their flyover to perfection, and as the red arrows streaked across the blue sky above Buckingham Palace, the crowd erupted in fresh cheers. Catherine tilted her head back to watch the planes paint their trails of red, white, and blue across the heavens, while photographers captured the moment that would become one of the most iconic images of the entire day. The family remained on the balcony for nearly 10 minutes, allowing everyone in the crowd to see them clearly and take photographs that would become treasured family memories. Catherine felt the warmth of the afternoon sun on her shoulders and the joy of the crowd washing over her like a blessing. This moment on the balcony was her introduction to the nation as the woman who would one day stand here as queen, and the response from the people below told her that she was already beloved in that role. The coronation concert in the palace gardens that evening transformed the usually formal grounds into a magical outdoor theater. Catherine had changed once again, this time into an elegant emerald green gown that seemed to capture and hold the light from the stage installations around the garden. The color was bold and striking, the departure from the more conservative tones she usually chose, but it perfectly suited the celebratory mood of the evening. Thousands of people had gathered on the palace lawns for the free concert that would celebrate the new king's reign with music and performances from around the world. Catherine took her seat in the royal box, where she had a perfect view of the stage and the excited faces in the audience below. The emerald dress sparkled under the theatrical lights, while the matching earrings she wore caught and reflected the colored beams that swept across the crowd. The entertainment began with a performance by the London Symphony Orchestra, playing pieces specially commissioned for the coronation. Catherine listened with evident pleasure, her hands folded in her lap and a serene expression on her face. She applauded enthusiastically after each piece and seemed genuinely moved by the music that filled the garden with its soaring melodies. International stars took the stage throughout the evening, performing everything from classical pieces to modern pop songs. Catherine clapped along with the music and was photographed laughing with genuine delight at some of the more entertaining moments. Her natural warmth and obvious enjoyment of the festivities made her even more endearing to the television audience watching around the world. During intermission, Catherine was seen chatting animatedly with other members of the royal family and distinguished guests in the royal box. Her ease in social situations and her ability to make everyone around her feel comfortable had always been one of her greatest strengths. Tonight that gift was on full display as she moved gracefully between conversations, making each person feel as if they had her complete attention. The highlight of the evening came when youth choirs from across the Commonwealth took the stage to perform traditional hymns and songs from their home countries. Catherine was visibly moved by their voices rising together in harmony, representing the unity and diversity of the modern Commonwealth. Tears sparkled in her eyes as she listened to children singing in languages from around the world, all united in their celebration of the new king. Prince William sat beside her throughout the concert, occasionally leaning over to whisper comments that made her laugh softly. Their easy companionship and obvious affection for each other was captured by photographers and would later be featured in newspapers around the world as an example of a modern royal marriage built on genuine love and mutual respect. As the evening drew to a close, spectacular fireworks lit up the London sky, turning night into a canvas of brilliant colors. Catherine's face glowed in the reflected light of the bursting stars above, while her emerald dress seemed to absorb and reflect each flash of gold and silver. She stood with the rest of the audience as the final painted the heavens with cascades of light that seemed to celebrate not just the coronation, but the bright future that lay ahead for the monarchy. The final firework faded into the night sky, leaving trails of smoke that drifted across the stars. Catherine remained standing for a moment, taking in the magical atmosphere of the garden, where thousands of people had come together to celebrate their new king. The success of the day was evident in the joy on every face around her, and she felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had played her part in making the coronation memorable for everyone who witnessed it. What the cameras did not capture were the tender private moments that made this day so special for Catherine personally. During a quiet break between the ceremony and the balcony appearance, she had been photographed by the palace staff photographer, helping Princess Charlotte adjust her small tiara. The image showed Catherine kneeling beside her daughter, their heads bent together in concentration as they worked to get the delicate crown positioned perfectly. In another candid moment captured behind the scenes, Catherine was seen teaching Prince Louis how to bow properly to his grandfather. Her patience with her youngest son was evident as she demonstrated the correct posture again and again until he could perform the gesture with confidence. These small acts of motherly guidance showed the world that despite all the pageantry and protocol, she remained devoted to her role as a parent above all else. Palace staff later revealed that Catherine had personally thanked each member of her styling team with handwritten notes expressing her gratitude for their hard work. She had also insisted on meeting with the florists who had created the stunning arrangements throughout Westminster Abbey, taking time to learn about the symbolism behind each flower choice and the hours of work that had gone into the displays. Catherine made a point of speaking with representatives from each Commonwealth nation who had traveled to London for the coronation. She listened carefully as they shared stories about their countries and their hopes for the new king's reign. Her genuine interest in their perspectives and her warm manner made each conversation meaningful despite the brief time available. Even more touching were the moments she shared with elderly veterans who had served the crown throughout their lives. Catherine spoke with them about their service and listened to their memories of previous royal occasions. Her respect for their contributions was evident in every word and gesture, and many of them were moved to tears by her sincere appreciation for their sacrifices. During the reception following the Abbey service, Catherine was seen helping an elderly guest who had difficulty navigate through the crowded room. Without drawing attention to herself, she simply offered her arm and guided the woman to a chair where she could rest comfortably. These small acts of kindness went largely unnoticed by the media, but were deeply appreciated by those who witnessed them. One particularly poignant moment came when Catherine encountered a group of children from a Commonwealth nation who had won a competition to attend the coronation. Their excitement was infectious, and she spent several minutes chatting with them about their journey to London and what they thought of the ceremony. Her ability to connect with children had always been one of her special gifts, and watching her interact with these young visitors reminded everyone why she was so beloved by families across the nation. The day had been a marathon of public appearances and protocol, but Catherine handled each moment with grace and genuine warmth. Palace insiders noted that she never seemed tired or overwhelmed, despite the incredible demands placed on her throughout the nearly 20-hour event. Her stamina and positive attitude set an example for everyone around her and contributed significantly to the overall success of the coronation celebrations. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed from the palace gardens, Catherine finally returned to her private apartments at Kensington Palace. The corridors were quiet now after the controlled chaos of the day, and she walked slowly through the familiar spaces still wearing her emerald green gown. The events of the day replayed in her mind like scenes from a beautiful dream. She paused at the window of her sitting room and looked out over London, where the lights of the city twinkled like earthbound stars. Somewhere out there, millions of people were discussing the day's events and sharing photographs they had taken of the royal family. Catherine felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had represented her family and her country with dignity and grace. The coronation had been about more than just witnessing King Charles receive his crown. For Catherine, it had been a public demonstration that she was ready for her own future role as queen consort. The confidence she had displayed throughout the day, the natural way she had handled every situation, and the genuine warmth she had shown to everyone she met proved that she understood the responsibilities that lay ahead. As she finally retired to her bedroom, Catherine thought about how far she had come since the nervous young woman who had joined the royal family years earlier. The girl who had once worried about making mistakes in public had grown into a woman who could stand before the world with complete confidence. Tonight, as she tucked her children into their beds, she knew that the coronation had been not just an ending, but a beginning for their family's role in the monarchy. The day would be remembered for its pageantry and tradition, but Catherine hoped it would also be remembered for the human moments that made it special. The sight of a mother helping her daughter with her tiara, the image of a future queen showing kindness to strangers, and the picture of a family united in service to their country would be the lasting legacy of King Charles III's coronation day.